What's happening, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. We got lots of time. A little bit later on the show, we're going to be joined by one of our favorites on here, Avry, going to be talking all things Edmonton Oilers. Of course, interesting offseason for them. A lot of changes, a lot of talk about what they're going to do in terms of, goaltending. Are they going to stick with the tandem they've got? And also Conor McDavid's next contract. There's a lot of stuff to get into with the Oilers. So happy to have back on Avry in just a little bit here, about 15 minutes. But in the meantime, I got a lot to talk about. We got a lot going on NHL-wise, even though it is sort of the dead of summer, so to speak. No like major trades or signings or anything. But like we always do on the show, first going to show you what we got going on in the Fanatics View channel. Lots of stuff. So anytime there's like a signing or a trade or anything like that, one of the things you can rely on Fanatics View is us getting the content up on here. And these are full media calls. You know, sometimes you're watching, Sports Center or whatever. You're going to get maybe the 4 or 5 minute clip or less than that. You're going to get maybe 30 seconds of a media call. And the nice thing about Fanatics View is we got the full media availability on here. 20 minutes with Nate Schmidt. Who wouldn't like that if you're a Utah Mammoth fan? Ryan Reeves, Nick Hague. Lots of stuff here. So my guy Taylor updating this as much as possible. So that's one of the benefits of subscribing to the channel. Even in the dead of summer, there's still stuff we have to talk about here. So we'll get into that. A couple other things that have gone on since the last time we spoke. Obviously, there was the whole issue with not issue, but there was obviously the Hockey Canada players, the trial. The players, there's a lot of questions as to what's going to happen next. Don't want to get too much into this, but there's a lot of news out there right now. Are some of the 5 ex-players going to be allowed back in the league? The league right now basically saying, even though they were found not guilty, they are still taking their time as far as reinstatement, if that's even going to be a possibility. One of the names that's been floating around from that group of players that were involved in all this is Carter Hart, obviously former Philadelphia Flyers goaltender. Will he find a home next year if he is reinstated? That's something that we'll be keeping an eye on for sure in terms of that. And the Oilers might be a team that might be interested. I mean, we'll see. Although I saw something yesterday basically refuting that. So maybe we'll get Avery's thoughts on everything there. Let's go over something I wanted to talk about a little bit here. The Athletic has their typical article, annual article of the 10 best contracts in 2025. And I think it's an interesting list. We can go through that a little bit now as we're still kind of waiting on some more news. If you look at here at NHL News, there isn't a whole lot going on. Jimmy VC might be playing in the KHL. I don't think we want to talk about that. So we'll kind of just wait around to see what has gone on. I think that's since the last time we did the show, there really hasn't been much news. There's been like a few signings and all that. We talked about the Dakota Joshua trade a few weeks back. That was pretty much it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this article because I do have some thoughts on it. So this is where Dom Lucian from The Athletic goes over his top contracts, and it's based off projections. And I got a bit of an objective with this one. So coming in at number 1 on their list is Jack Hughes. His contract is $8 million, which is fine. His market value is 15.6. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's the right projection. Again, Dom's basing it off his model. But, one of the things with Jack Hughes that has to be mentioned is his health. He has not played a full season. I think if you combine his last 3 seasons of games missed, it ends up being like he's missed an entire season. If we look at kind of the stats right now, I'll bring those up right here. I know there's certainly some potential Jack Hughes. And if he was healthy, I could see this, possibly being realistic here in terms of the contract value. I do think it's still a little bit high, like 15.6. That's like more than anyone I think in the league right now in terms of a contract. Now I know the cap's going up, so the projections will be a little bit higher, but I think that's a little high. I know he's 24, but if you're looking at Jack Hughes, and we're going to go have a quick look at his what he's done so far here. So his rookie year, he plays 61 games. He gets 21 points. The season that he really broke out was 22-23, 78 games, 100 points. That certainly is, if he can keep that up for every season, then certainly that's something that maybe would lead to that higher number here. But you look at the last couple seasons, 62 games, just been limited to both. He's only played a full season or close to a full season back in 22-23. So injuries are a concern. Of course, last year, I think it was the shoulder that kept him out for a little bit. So that's one thing to kind of monitor and keep in mind here. But I don't know if this, you guys let me know in the chat if you're watching this right now. I think that's a little high. I don't even think you can say this is a value contract if Jack Hughes can't get through a full season. That is something that is, good to monitor. And the Devils haven't had success because of that, because of him being out, right? They weren't expected to do much in the playoffs last year. They didn't. So yeah, I got a little bit of an objection there with the Jack Hughes coming in at number 1, just because I think the health, again, this is just based solely off the model. So I can understand why they valued it this high, but I just think the fact that he's not that healthy shouldn't be that high. Now, Brandon Hagel, I do agree with. I think his contract is closer worth to that. I remember when he signed that contract, people felt like it was a very good value option for Tampa Bay. I mean, 6.5 is very generous here. And it's a 7-year contract. And again, these contracts are based off long-term contracts. Otherwise, Quinn Hughes would probably be right up there too. I think Quinn Hughes is getting 5 something a season in terms of, or not 5. What is Quinn Hughes' contract? Why don't I just look it up instead of just guessing? Quinn Hughes' contract's got to be good, but Quinn Hughes is up in a year or two. But if you look at what he's getting right now, he's far below market value. Let me find the contract right now as I'm trying to frivolously Google all this right now. If you look at Hughes's contract, yeah, he's at 7.8. I mean, this is a guy that is considered, well, he is considered the best defenseman in Canucks history, and he's certainly considered one of the best defensemen in the league. He did win the Norris, not last season, season before. 7.8, I mean, that's a bargain, but again, it's based off long-term contracts here, right? So Hagel one is getting 7 years here. What's happening with Conor McDavid? Have you heard anything? Well, we're going to ask Avry. He's going to be hopping on here in about 9 minutes here on the show, see if there's any updates. The rumors right now that I'm hearing, and this is something we'll discuss with Avry, is it could be a short-term deal for Conor McDavid, maybe like 4 years instead of the 8 that I think the Oilers fans would hope for. And I think if you're McDavid, you probably think that's the better option as well with the cap going up, right? So you could get even more money in 4 years than you might even get for it now. How old's McDavid? Trying to remember his exact age right now. He is 28. So, that would bring you into 32. I think McDavid is still going to be at a, playing at a very good level here. So we'll have to see. And also, I'm sure McDavid wants some options. If he does sign 4 years and things aren't going, the way they're supposed to go as far as the Oilers trying to win a cup, does he stick around? So there's a lot of questions here with the Oilers and Conor McDavid. Again, one thing I pointed out last time we had Avry on the show is that, Jeff Jackson is the president of the Oilers, is McDavid's former agent. They've got McDavid's former junior coach, Chris Knobloch, coaching the team. They've done a lot to make McDavid happy. They got Draisaitl locked up. So we'll have to see how things look in the rest of the offseason. Yeah, he is 28. Yeah, I just looked that up. So there we go. So yeah, we'll find out. But again, Avry going to be joining us here shortly to discuss that. No one is better when it comes to covering the Edmonton Oilers. Let's go through some more of these contracts. While we're waiting for Avry here. Seth Jarvis. Again, I agree with that. 12.9. Again, seems a little high. I guess a lot of these projections are off the fact that because the cap's going up, you have to raise, all the good contracts right now by a couple percentage, right? So I think that's where this is coming from. But to me, a $12.9 million contract would be like one of the top players in the league. I don't know if Jarvis necessarily fits that mold. He might. I think a lot of that, again, is off projection. But if you look at Seth Jarvis and what he's done so far, he's got, his career high is 67. Is that worth 12.9? I don't know about that. I guess they're expecting him to get even higher as far as the points go. And again, he's young. He's 23, going to be 24 in February. So these are some things to keep in mind. Sam Reinhart, I'll agree with, especially if you add in what Sam Reinhart did in the playoffs last year. Definitely worth more than the 8.6, but that's the entire Florida thing right now, right? Is they've got a lot of these players. Look at Brad Marchand, look at Sam Bennett. They've brought these guys back on cheaper contracts because players want to play in Florida. And you can talk about the tax and all this different stuff too, but it boils down to players feeling comfortable in the market. You have the nice practice facility. You get to drive a golf cart to your practice. You don't have the media bothering you. You get nice weather. These are all things that players consider, right? It's much easier to play in Florida than it is in Toronto, right? Let's go down the list here. Nathan MacKinnon, 18.3. See, I get that. McKinnon's considered one of the best players in the league. In fact, the Hockey News had an article out last week, and they put him at number 1. And part of the reason they put him at number 1 was because of the fact that he doesn't have a lot of support compared to what McDavid has with Leon Draisaitl. So, and that's another thing I maybe bring up with Avry. What does he think of that list? But yeah, 18.3 million for MacKinnon. If that's the standard of what the top players in the league are going to get, I understand that. McKinnon's proved it. He's already at 12.6. But this is what's funny to me is that, he's at 12.6. Obviously, he's going to get a raise, but they're projecting Jack Hughes at being at 15.6. I don't get that. I get it because I guess the model is basing it off projections, but these models can sometimes be wrong. But the MacKinnon one, I don't have an issue with. And actually, what's MacKinnon? He's still got 6 more years at 12.6. So yeah, that is a bargain. In fact, you could put this one even higher because of the fact that McKinnon's one of the best players in the league. 30 years old, still got 6 more. I guess because he's older that it's going down a little bit lower, whereas these guys above him are much younger. Not Reinhart, but yeah, well, even Reinhart, I'd put him ahead of Reinhart, honestly. I don't know. Let's go down the rest of the list. Leon Draisaitl, again, 14 million, projected 18.4. That makes sense. Dylan Guenther, 7.1 to 11.2. Again, same thing. They're basing it off the projections here. 22 years old. And you look at Dylan Guenther, good season last year, right? And again, young guy, so a lot of potential there. But he's got 60 points. you got to hope that he can continue to build off that. I guess that's my issue with this article, where it's like it's really going off projections, which I don't necessarily agree with. If Conor McDavid really wanted to stay in Edmonton, then he would have signed already. I don't know about that. I mean, it's middle. I mean, we're still in July here. The season ended. He just went to the Cup final, right? I don't think. I think there's a lot to look into. I don't think it's as easy as like, yeah, he would have signed already, because you got to remember, not only did they play late into the season, but you're also considered the best player in the league. There's a lot at stake here. This isn't just some random player that's signing a contract. I think if you're McDavid, you take your time with this. You figure out what the best options are. Because he said it at the presser at the end of the year. He kind of left that open, being like, look, I'm happy. He basically said, I'm happy in Edmonton, but also we got to, kind of implied, like, we got to figure this out. We can't keep losing to Florida. So I think all these things weigh into it. It's not a simple contract. Like, again, if we're talking about like a veteran who's like re-signing with the team and, is maybe past their prime, then that contract's going to get done a lot easier. But if we're talking about a Conor McDavid, I mean, that could take a while. So we'll see. So I don't know. I'm not as impatient as well. Let's go through the rest of these contracts. Lucas Raymond, again, same thing. Matt Boldy, I do like that contract as well. Tim Stützle. So those are the top 10 there. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this list. Again, they're basing it a lot off projections and everything else. So the Athletic always keeping us occupied in the summer here. Got another 3 minutes, and Avery's going to join us here momentarily. Let's get to the rest of your questions. Let's keep the questions coming. What are some free agents right now? I know there's been some updates as far as some of the free agents that are still out there. The big free agent right now is not big, but a name that I'm surprised has not been picked up yet is Jack Roslovic. Speaking of Hurricanes, is he going to get signed? The Canucks apparently are kicking tires. I think he wants somewhere in the range of like a $3 million contract. Do the Canucks take that option if you can't make a trade for someone? Apparently Mason McTavish is available potentially. Marco Rossi still hasn't signed with the Minnesota Wild. So there's a lot of things that are going on. We keep hearing there's going to be all these big trades. The latest I heard now is the beginning of August, there's going to be a lot of trades. I'll believe it when I see it. I think it's very tough for teams to make trades right now because you've got teams with cap space, but you also have teams every team pretty much is looking to improve. So they don't want necessarily futures. They want something that can help them now. And there's just not a lot of trades to be made that way. If we're talking about a rebuilding team and you have assets, like maybe Pittsburgh is one, like I'm surprised Pittsburgh maybe hasn't moved like a Rust or Erik Karlsson or someone like that. I can understand that because they're selling. But if you're looking at like most teams, they're all trying to get better. They all think they have a shot, right? Every team feels, because you know what it is? They're looking at like, teams like, also like, I think there's teams that are looking at like Florida as an example, right? They've built mainly through trades and free agent signings. You look at St. Louis winning the Cup a number of years ago. That was a lot of not rebuilding. It was just, again, trades and some good drafting as well. So I think teams feel like, hey, if you just get in, you've got a shot. I mean, we've seen upsets in the playoffs before. I think that's part of it too. So we'll see if things pick up in a little bit. I hope they do. It is kind of getting boring right now in the summer, trying to talk about stuff, but we still do the show every week. That's why we only do it once a week. If I had to do the show like 4 days a week, I think I'd be running out of some options, personally. So keep it going. Again, Avery going to join us here in a couple minutes, covering the Edmonton Oilers. One of our favorites here on here as well. What else do we have, guys? I'm trying to think of any other signings. Oh, there we go. He is joining us right now. One of our favorites here on the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Had to bring him back. It is kind of that part of the summer where we're, trying to project what's going to happen for the season. And the Edmonton Oilers busy both moving players and bringing some players in. And here to talk about all that is our guy, Avry from the Hockey News. Avery, how's it going, man? How's your summer going?
Good, James. How you doing, buddy? Been a busy time for me. As someone who does a ton of sports, the NHL season ended and it went right into CFL and CBL work. So it's been nonstop.
Yeah, I wanted to actually start with the CFL because I was at the Lions game on Sunday with that amazing catch that happened, shades of Odell Beckham Jr. What did you think of that? Because we don't see that in the CFL too often.
That was easily the play of the year. Of the year. And you saw, even down south, you saw NFL guys saying, wow, that was the interception of the year no matter what league you're in.
If you haven't seen it, CFL is reposted. I think I retweeted it on my account, but if you guys haven't seen the catch, you got to go check it out. Too bad the Lions lost, though. They don't have any defense. That was really disappointing, but nonetheless, a very good game. Happy to have you back on, Avery, because I know the Oilers, there's been a lot of changes. I got a lot of things to ask you about the Oilers, too, because I'm curious to see sort of how things are going. But let's start first with, some of the players that have left. Arvidsson has left, Corey Perry, Evander Kane. Did you sort of agree with the Oilers kind of moving on from some of these players? Do you think a change was needed? needed, or do you think they should have maybe kept some of the names that ended up leaving?
I think in most part you kind of saw it coming. I think the obvious one, Evander Kane, was a name that no one was surprised to see him leave. I know it came out that the team was trying to find a deal for him during the Cup final for next year, and it was rumored for a long time and hinted at that, this team was going to move him. So wasn't really shocked he was dealt. I think it was more a shock as to who he was dealt to inside the division going to Vancouver. That was a bit more surprising. He's now a Vancouver Canucks. That was a bit more surprising in terms of where he went. Other guys they lost, like Corey Perry's an LA King now, and Victor Arvidsson leaves. So a few of those guys, John Klimberg's out as a Shark, Jeff Skinner's out as a Shark as well too. So a lot of guys left for inside the conference, and these are guys who I do think will have value for these teams next year. I think Jeff Skinner is going to be a great player on a Sharks team that's still rebuilding. He'll be a good veteran piece in San Jose for guys like Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini, and then Victor Arvidsson, someone who, Arvidsson, it just didn't work out. We thought, again, injuries, he was banged up most of the year. So if he was healthy, in my mind, I do think things would be a lot different for him, James.
I wanted to start with Evander Kane because this one really piqued my interest. This, I'll just tell you as someone who follows the Vancouver market, this came out of nowhere. No one really expected the Canucks to go after Evander Kane. Also, the timing of it was interesting because if you remember, that happened before they signed Brock Besser. So everyone just assumed that when Kane was coming in, that Besser wouldn't be back. I mean, especially even more, they're bringing in another winger here. We talked about the fact that, you're trading within the division. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of like they traded Kane for Vasily Podkolzin in a way, because they also got a 4th round pick, I believe, for Podkolzin. So it's almost like they kind of traded that back. But a lot of people in Vancouver were wondering, with all the locker room issues last year with JT Miller and everything that happened there, a lot of Canucks fans were concerned about Kane coming over. It's been well documented about some of the things that have happened throughout his playing career. But from what I was hearing in Edmonton, I heard he was a good teammate. I heard he did a lot for the community. What was sort of your assessment of Kane while he was in Edmonton as far as all that extracurricular stuff outside of him being a teammate?
Yeah, in large part, I think he understood, Edmonton was, quote unquote, his last chance to make things right. And in large part, he kept his nose clean. There was no issues in large part. He understood, hey, I can't mess this up in Edmonton. I cannot mess this up. I have to make sure things are on point. So I do understand why people still are in Vancouver are concerned because, that baggage, is still there. And Evander Kane he's not a saint. He's not 100% perfect. He's not a saint. There are issues that have come in his past. So I understand that as well. And also too, Evander Kane is that you've got a guy on the wrong side of 30 who has injury problems, who has had injuries with his sports hernia, the wrist injury, other injuries. This is a guy in which his game isn't what it used to be, even just 3 years ago when Edmonton brought him in back in 2022, before he's that dinged up. So you're bringing in a guy who has had a checkered past before and has had injury issues. So I understand why Canucks fans are wondering. It's like, why would we trade for him? Why do we bring him in? Especially after the JT Miller stuff, which, as we know, was a gong show in Vancouver.
Yeah. So that's where it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see how he fits. And I guess one thing that's kind of interesting, obviously, Kane, roots in Vancouver, grew up there, played for the Vancouver Giants. So he very much wanted to play for Vancouver. I heard even before he signed with Edmonton that he was looking at potentially going to Vancouver as well. Again, there's a lot of ties there. So now he comes full circle. I believe he's about to hit 1,000 games. So, what a way to do that in Vancouver, where he grew up and where he came from. There was the incident last year in the Stanley Cup final where I believe he didn't shake the hands, right? Or there was some issue, a bit of like unsportsmanlike stuff. Was there anything in Edmonton as well that similar stuff that happened during his tenure there of him maybe not being the best sportsman when it came to that? Obviously he plays with an edge, but was there anything kind of out of the ordinary that you can remember other than what happened in the finals?
I know there was a big controversy where he was on the bench, him arguing with Leon Draisaitl, and the thing was he brought in Corey Perry to try and calm him down. So I think there was a little bit of tension between him and Draisaitl when it came to the bench stuff. And it came to that aspect. So I do think there might have been a little bit of tension, but end of the day, they're able to work through it. You get to a cup final. But I agree. I wasn't a fan of the missing the handshake line. I know he left game 6 due to game misconduct. But to me, in my mind, I would still like to see every player come back and do the handshake line because end of the day, the season's over and that's going to stand out no matter who you are.
Yeah, I agree. And you think him being a bit older, maybe that would, put that stuff behind you. But saying that, we're talking about a player that plays with an edge. He will go out there. He will be physical. He will stick up for his teammates. That was something severely missed last year with the Canucks. There were times when Brock Besser got hit by Tanner Jeannot and there was a concussion. There was Quinn Hughes getting banged up last year. There was no pushback. When the Canucks had Nikita Zadorov, they had that pushback, but obviously Zadorov going to the Bruins. How much will that benefit the Canucks? Just having a guy that will stick up for his teammates. Maybe sometimes that'll cause you the penalty, but I think a lot of Canucks fans were really, frankly, pissed off last year that there was no pushback when certain things like that happen.
It's not the be-all, end-all, but you do want someone who is going to show that, hey, we're not going to be pushed over. You can't bully us. That's one thing about Evander Kane is that he's always been that gritty player who's not afraid to get in your face, be physical, and step up for a teammate. That's a big factor that he does bring to this team. And when he is healthy, he is a guy who in the past has shown, he can be a 20-goal guy, 25-goal guy. So, he can bring you offense, and he will show that, hey, you know what? Being pushed around isn't going to happen when I'm on the ice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in there. Again, we'll see how it all goes. I just wonder, how a guy like him and Elias Pettersson are going to go. Because basically last year, the issue was, Miller's a very vocal guy, very emotional, and you want some of that too. And Miller was kind of that guy too, where something happened, he would stick up for your teammates. It didn't really work well, right? Pettersson, from what we hear, is one of these guys that he needs positive reinforcement as opposed to a guy being like, dude, pick it up, So I hope that that's going to work out well in Vancouver. We'll see. I don't even know if they're going to play together. I think right now I saw the NHL projections. I think they have the first line being DeBrusk, Pettersson, and Brock Besser. And I think second line will be Kane, Cheadle, and I forget who else. But anyways, we'll have to see how that goes as well. But let's get back to the Oilers, though, and some of the additions, some of the subtractions as well. Jeff Skinner leaving. It looked like Skinner was just never a fit there, especially with when Chris Knobloch came in. Is it just one of those things where, it wasn't because it seemed like Oilers fans wanted him to play, but the coach didn't? It was just one of those cases he lost the coach's trust?
It was a really weird thing. I don't even know really had the coach's trust, because I've been a big fan of Jeff Skinner's game for a very long time. And he's someone in which when you play him, he's capable of being that 60, 70-point guy easily. And it was clear that Chris Knobloch didn't like his style because Skinner's game is much more of an offensive one than being a two-way player. And Skinner played in 72 games and still got 16 goals. Could have been a 20-goal guy if he played all 82. And when he played in the playoffs, when he played in the postseason, he still found a way to put up 2 points, got a goal in his second, scored a goal in his first playoff game. So it was really weird as to why Chris Knobloch didn't see it and say, you know what, hey, he's not my kind of player, but when I do play him, he still finds a way to be effective. So that's one thing where I think it was, a coach stuck in his way, the coach saying, this is how I want a player to play. And even though Jeff Skinner was able to produce and put up numbers, it wasn't what Chris Knobloch wanted. So I think it was just a matter of a coach stuck in his ways in terms of what he wants a player to do, which was kind of unfortunate because I thought when they brought in Skinner on the 1-year deal, I thought it was going to be a thing where he was going to thrive in a major role in the top six.
Let's talk about some of the additions for the Oilers. Andrew Mangiapane, obviously very familiar with Alberta, played for Calgary. Were you excited? I think this is a very good kind of player that could elevate his game. Just playing with Draisaitl or McDavid or one of these names here. What did you think of that signing by the Oilers?
I liked it a lot. You bring him in, 2-year deal, a guy who was very effective in Calgary, had a great run with the Flames, had a 35-goal campaign. Another year in Washington, a bit of a down year with the Capitals winning 28 points. But I think this could be a really solid bounce back year for him in Edmonton in that top six, playing on the left wing. And that's a guy, in a pinch, if you need him to, he probably could fill in on the top line for the Oilers. So I think that's a guy who's got a really good shot and will be a very effective weapon, because I believe you can never have too many bona fide top six players on a roster, especially in Edmonton.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of upside there as well. I'm just looking at some of the other moves. Ike Howard, you guys made that trade. Curtis Lazar, Canucks fans are familiar with him. They signed him, and then it was just a classic Jim Rutherford, Patrick Alvin move where it's like, you're not working out? Okay, we're going to trade you, even though we just signed you in the offseason. So he's back in Canada. I know he's from British Columbia, so obviously close to home, which will be nice for him. Played in New Jersey last year. Seemed like he did a decent role. Are you excited about that depth signing there? Again, a guy who, if people forget, high draft pick by Ottawa, didn't really pan out the way I think people wanted, and then kind of had to change his game a bit, but he's still sticking around in the league.
And good for him. Yeah, he's had quite the NHL journey. And he mentioned in an interview on 880 Chet over here, he mentioned how his last year in New Jersey, he wasn't healthy for most of that season. He was banged up. He had his injury problems. So I want to see what he can do. I think he'll start the year in Bakersfield and get called up in short order to Edmonton. But I want to see what he can do now that he's healthy again and probably playing third, fourth line minutes with a chance to maybe move up. So if he can thrive first in AHL and work his way up into the roster, I think it'll be a very good move for this organization, in my mind, James.
Okay, let's get to the big talking point. Everyone's been asking about this. We got questions in the chat about it. Conor McDavid, what's the latest? What are you hearing? I think what we're hearing out there right now is shorter term deal, maybe 4 years. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's kind of what's been floating around. I think they're kind of waiting to see, or he's waiting to see about the cap and all that. What are you hearing right now with McDavid? Because, we have someone in the chat here. I'm just going to read this. Veronica saying, Conor McDavid really wanted to stay in Edmonton. Don't you think he would have already signed? I was kind of explaining to Veronica, this is Conor McDavid. Like, this is a very complex contract, not only for the fact that he's arguably the best player in the league, but also the fact that like he didn't really sound too committed to Edmonton 100%. I'd say if you have to give a percentage, it's probably like 90% he's going to stay in Edmonton. But he also kind of made that line at the end. I forget the exact quote, but it's kind of like, we got to see what we can do here. With all that in mind, like what's sort of your feeling about this McDavid situation and how it's going to unfold?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, it may not be an 8-year deal, but I do think McDavid is going to stay in Edmonton for around 4 or 5 years because again, he's grown up here. All of his pro hockey life has been in Edmonton, Alberta. And he enjoys being a part of this community, enjoys being a part of this team. He went to 2 straight cup finals with this franchise. And I know he thinks he can win here at Edmonton. So it may not be an 8-year deal, but it might be a 4 or 5-year deal. I do think the cap is a factor, waiting to see how much more he can get. But everything of what I heard is that Conor McDavid's eye is set on staying in Edmonton and trying to find a way to win a cup as an Edmonton Oiler going forward.
Now, how much do you think that will, as far as like what McDavid's going to do, how much is that based off like what the Oilers are kind of selling him? Now, I talked about this before he hopped on here. They have Jeff Jackson, obviously, is the president, who I believe was his former agent. You have Chris Knobloch, who is his former coach and junior. Look, they've tried to make McDavid happy as possible. They got Draisaitl re-signed. Like, is that enough to like keep, like you said, you're sort of leaning towards McDavid signing no matter what? But like, how much does that stuff help? Do you think just making him comfortable and making it like maybe they got to give him the key to the city? I don't know, but like, how much do you think that plays into this as well? Of like them saying like, look, like this is your team. We're going to try and make this as comfortable as possible.
I think it plays. I think there's a factor to it because I don't know if he would get everything, quote unquote, he wanted. Say if he were to go to an LA, a Boston, a Toronto, some teams may not be able to give him as much as you would get in Edmonton, where you are the king of the castle in that market, which he is right now in Edmonton. I do think the move to bring in Mangiapane and Ike Howard show, listen, we're going to surround you with more top-end talent to try and give you that extra push once again to get past whoever it is that comes out of the Eastern Conference next year. So I do think that comfort and trying to swing big is going to be a big thing to show him, hey, you know what? Hey, I know, yes, we fell short again, but we're going to continue to push forward to getting you a cup some way.
The goaltending was a big topic of discussion. I don't think the be all end all, but certainly people feel like you can't keep running back the same tandem. We've got 1 more year left of Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. There were no changes in the offseason, and we saw some goalie movement. We saw John Gibson go to Detroit. I don't know if the Oilers were in on that or what's sort of happening there. One thing that's happened behind the scenes is they've obviously changed some of the coaching staff. I know Paul Coffey taking a step back. I believe they have a new goalie coach now. Is that enough too, do you think, because again, I think McDavid didn't outright say it, but I think there is some concern about the goaltending and them just running back the same tandem. Do you think that's something they're going to address, or with the new coaching change on the goaltending side of things, is that sort of good enough?
I think eventually they do make a move with goaltending. I don't think it'll be Stuart Skinner getting moved again because Stuart Skinner is an Oilers draft pick. He's a homegrown guy. He's someone who they've cultivated over the past few years, and every bit of this organization has basically said, we're riding or dying with Stuart Skinner. It's going to be who do you bring in to be a 1B or a backup to replace Calvin Pickard. And right now, I'm not sure who the answer is going to be. I thought it might have been an Alex Lyon or a Jake Allen. Those names are no longer options in play. So unless something drastic shakes up this fall here, I think they're going to try to run it back with Pickard and Skinner. But with a new goaltending coach, hopefully, I think their thinking is right now, if we have a new ear, if we have a new voice inside Stuart Skinner's ear, maybe things change. Because I think the mentality was Dustin Schwartz has gone as far as he can take these 2 goaltenders. Let's bring in somebody new to try and unlock Stuart some way, somehow, and help him out when it comes to different styles of play, possibly.
I'm also wondering, it's always the beginning of the year too. Could we see some goalies available? I mean, there could be some goalies on waivers. You saw the whole carousel that happened last year with Detroit, and adding goaltenders and subtracting goaltenders. I'm just curious to see, like, maybe the Oilers wait a little bit and see how, because there's going to be a lot of teams do have cap space, but there's also teams that are maybe a little bit crowded in the crease too. So I wonder if they maybe look at that as an option. But yeah, I do wonder if that's something they look at. And I agree with you. I think Skinner's the one that stays. I think Pickard's the one they sort of move on from. Now, kind of making a segue here. And we haven't talked about this, obviously, but there was obviously the whole Hockey Canada thing that happened last week, the not guilty verdict, which the NHL is still reviewing if they're going to be eligible to play. Now, the latest we heard yesterday, I'm going to read the quote here, Carter Hart, because I think people immediately, just how you've seen how the Oilers have kind of operated in the past. They brought in Kane, which was considered controversial. I know different management, but Stan Bowman, even just getting hired to the Oilers, that was a bit controversial as well. So with Carter Hart, that's sort of the big one, obviously former goaltender of the Flyers. Reading it here from Frank Saravalli, it said Carter Hart is a non-starter for the Edmonton Oilers as 5 former Hockey Canada players acquitted of sexual assault remain ineligible to play in the NHL. With all that said, do you think that, it sounds like they're not interested, but do you think that there could be a change of heart, no pun intended, if there is eligibility there for Carter Hart?
No, it sounds like no. I think if he's rule, I still think it's a hard no. And I know I've heard the NHL, from what I've heard internally, possibly the idea of these guys back in the league this season might not even happen. It might be these guys are gone for a year or possibly longer. So I think if you're any team in the league, one, you don't want the PR headache of bringing in these guys. And 2, why would you try and get a guy who might not be able to play for another year or 2 or longer? So I think that's the thing where he's a non-starter for many reasons and for good reason. I think you should be looking at somebody who you can bring in with less baggage, less headache, and as your next goaltender, as opposed to looking at a Carter Hart, who I don't think should be in this team's radar at all.
Yeah. And I think too, even if they are reinstated, I think it might be one of those situations where a lot of these guys are going to have to play overseas. And it's going to be one of those things where it's going to take some time for them to get back. I just think of Jake Virtanen as an example. We know the situation that happened in Vancouver with the sexual assault. He ended up playing overseas. The Oilers did have him on a tryout. Because I was just thinking, I was trying to remember the other player that they brought in, and it was kind of like controversial. It was Jake Virtanen, now that I think about it. But it didn't even pan out. Like, he's obviously not NHL caliber, and also just another PR nightmare there. So yeah, I was curious about that as far as Carter Hart as an option. I don't even know any veteran goaltenders that are even available right now that the Oilers could even look at. Like, it's been a very interesting league that way where, I think there's a number of teams that could use some goaltending. For example, like Carolina. I think that's something they haven't really addressed. I know they're still riding with Freddie Anderson, but I think that's a big question mark there. Even Vegas, Vegas is going in right now with Aiden Hill, and I think Schmid is their backup as well. Like, is that something you want to commit to? So I'm really curious, the goaltending standpoint. I think the only one, and I'm just saying this, maybe I'm a little biased, but Vancouver has figured that out in a way, and I know people weren't happy with that strategy of going with Demko and Lankinen, but you do have this 1-2 punch where if Demko gets injured, you got Lankinen who's very capable of backing up there. So I think that kind of what I'm saying is I think that's all going to shake out for certain teams as far as goaltenders that are available, and maybe the Oilers can kind of look at that. As we sort of wrap a bow here on the Oilers, do you see any other moves being made? Again, they've done a lot of stuff behind the scenes, not maybe a busy off season, but this is also a team that, went to the finals, back-to-back years. So I think there's a lot of, don't tinker too much with this roster and see what happens. What's sort of your thoughts on what the Oilers are going to do sort of from here until the beginning of the season?
I think as it stands right now, they're probably done. I mean, you never know. They could shock me and try and get another goaltending move to bring in somebody. They might make a trade. But we got to see. I do think it's more likely any more moves come once the season begins. I think this is pretty much your team come October when the season begins. But it wouldn't be shocked if in short order you do see this team make moves in late October or November. So that's how I see it.
Let's take a look at sort of the scope of the Western Conference right now, because there are some interesting moves, and this kind of ties into the Oilers. Ken Holland obviously getting hired by LA, and a lot of people were like, what are you doing with this cap space? They don't sign Gavrikov. He goes to New York. They sign a former Oiler in Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin from New Jersey. A lot of people didn't like the moves. Are you in that category as well? Like, I do wonder if that cap space could have been spent a little bit better.
Yeah, the move of Ken Holland over the past few years has just been very confusing to me. I see why King fans are mad, because the Cody Ceci move didn't make much sense to me. Losing Gavrikov was strange. And over the past few years, I mean, Edmonton, we saw people saying, what is Ken Holland doing? And now King fans are asking the exact same thing. And it goes back to, again, the NHL, you want to go back to a name you trust, a name even if that GM hasn't been doing that well, which to me has been like oh boy, more cycling. Even the gym isn't good anymore.
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. That you keep seeing the same names hired over and over again, and I think with Holland, I don't know how you'd summarize his time with the Oilers because I think there were some moves that were made well. I know people still criticize the Darnell Nurse contract, although he does eat up a lot of minutes for the Oilers as well. It's interesting that some of these GMs are not. I mean, some of them do. Matthew Darsh, I was really happy to see get a job with the Islanders. He was a finalist for the GM job in Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken, before they hired Patrick Allvin. So there is some, move forward instead of the same old people. But I think people still think it's the Ken Holland in Detroit, and it's just like, I don't know if that's really the case. And we saw that with some of the moves he made, but you never know, it could work out. Now on that topic, there's obviously going to be some movement in the Western Conference this year as far as teams, regressing or teams getting better. I think if you look at teams that I think could, potentially be in the playoffs this year, I think Utah with them getting Patera from Buffalo, I think that's, a move that could push them in there. They were close to, remember, if Utah didn't have all those injuries, I think they might've been in the playoffs. And then you look at some of the other teams like Vancouver, bias aside, but they're just, if they're healthy, if you're getting a healthy Demko, that could certainly be a game changer. They had a lot of 1-goal games that didn't go their way. I think if you had a healthy Demko, and that's obviously a big, in quotation marks, healthy Demko, if that works out, then that could be interesting. And then I look at some teams that could regress. I had Dave Hall on last week from Canucks Army. We both kind of agreed that St. Louis and LA could be teams that regress a bit. Are there any teams that stand out for you in the Western Conference that maybe could either regress or potentially get into the playoffs next year?
I agree with you on Utah. I think it's a team that for the past few years they've been knocking on the door of trying to trying to get into the postseason. Even when they're still back in Arizona, you could see them putting things together as a team that was destined to make a run, put all together. They've had their injuries and they fall off at times. But now, again, the trades they made to bring Paterka, they've been able to sustain with guys like Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller. That's a team in which I do think they find a way to get into the postseason. I think they possibly even threaten in the Central Division title. I think they threaten. I mean, maybe they probably don't win the Central, but I think they do threaten to win that division for some reason. Because I've liked what Bill Armstrong has done. Bill Armstrong is a low-key, very good GM in this league. And I think he's built himself a team that will be a contender in the Western Conference. If not this year, at least it's got to be next year, I think.
Yeah, I wonder about the goaltending too. How will that, help them, elevate them? That's another thing to kind of keep tabs on as well. I'm just looking at what Utah added in the offseason. I forgot about Paterka, but I like the Brandon Tanev mood, and Nate Schmidt, who we saw play, help out Florida last year, help them win the cup as well. So I think that's kind of interesting to see how they'll do. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There's always teams that surprise. The one that always sticks up for me last year, Nashville. Everyone's like, Nashville's going to be so much better. They got Marchessault, they got Steven Stamkos. It was the opposite. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that Nashville didn't do a bit of selling in the offseason, because I mean, you're basically running back the same team without, I guess they're just hoping for a better result. But that to me was a bit surprising, because I think we can all agree the only team that's really selling right now is Pittsburgh. Everyone else is trying to get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pittsburgh. Yeah. You mentioned the Penguins. That's going to be a team where I know people always keep that. Of course, I think they're going to regress again, unfortunately. But people keep saying to me, oh, with the Penguins, will Crosby leave? Will Crosby leave? Sidney Crosby's not going anywhere. Sidney Crosby is bleeding he's bleeding black and gold until the very end. He'll be the guy that'll play, 21, 22 years, whenever he calls it a day. I just don't see him asking for out of a franchise that he's been since he was 18 years old, won Stanley Cups. And you look at the Penguins Mount Rushmore, Crosby is there. I don't see him leaving.
And on that same note, I don't think they're getting McKenna. Everyone's like, oh, it's like, they got Lemieux and then they got Crosby and whatever. Like, the Penguins will regress. I agree with that. And the goaltending is a huge question mark. They're going with Tristan Jarry, whose jersey I have back here, by the way, local guy from where I live here. Yeah. I've told the story before, but his parents have a grocery store in the town over from where I live. Like, he's a local guy here. So there's some people supporting Tristan Jarry, but then they got Arthur Seelovs, who, don't get me wrong, saw a lot of Arthur Seelovs. You saw Arthur Seelovs in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Very good goaltender, but got 10 games with the Canucks last year. They didn't trust him, and ultimately they didn't feel that it was worth it to re-sign him, and they ended up re-signing Demko. So I think that goaltending is a big question mark there, but I can't see them being worse than Chicago. And like, people just assume like, oh, these storylines that like they're going to get, I don't know. I don't think they're going to get McKenna. They'd have to trade like Carlson and Rust and like Crosby and all these other, like they're going to be bad, but they're not going to be like the league's worst. That's what gets McKenna, in my opinion. I don't know what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I can't see, like, if Pittsburgh got McKenna, that would be generational. That would be generational greed. If you have a franchise that gets Lemieux, Crosby, and McKenna and Malkin like that, I don't see it happening though. But yeah, I think again, Chicago's going to be the front runner to get him. It's going to be another tough year for the Blackhawks, but I don't know if they do get him. I don't know if the lottery's going to shake up their way for getting Gavin McKenna. And I think Nashville, to me, is still a very, I don't know, they're going to be franchise. So if Nashville misses the playoffs, I could see making it as a Predator if Nashville misses the playoffs again this year.
That's actually, I didn't even think of Nashville. That's actually a good choice, because San Jose is going to be a bit better this year. I don't think they're a playoff team, but we talked about Skinner and some of the other names that they picked up. I think they will be better there. See, San Jose is doing it properly, and credit to Mike Greer, former Oiler, by the way,
yes.
for going out there and getting support for Macklin Celebrini, for Will Smith. I don't see that in Chicago. Bedard had a not great year, and they're not really supporting him that much. And again, I know it's easier said than done. It's been a hard offseason for a lot of teams that have all this cap space and can't use it because the free agent class wasn't very good. You had a lot of players re-signing. I do worry about Chicago, but I don't know if Chicago will be dead last either, because now they got Spencer Knight in that, right? Like, that's something that I think people forget. They have capable goaltending now. That's been an issue for years. So I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I think people just, they romanticize about the whole, with the Penguins, like, oh, McKenna, it's destiny. It's like, they're not going to be that bad. Like, I think people don't think of that. People talk about Vancouver being a lottery team next year. Yes, if Pettersson's terrible and things don't go well, they'll be a bad team, but they're not going to be the worst in the league. I mean, this is a team that missed the playoffs by a couple points, and they're pretty much running back the same team, and they have an even better defensive core now with Marcus Pettersson. So I'm rambling on. Billy's got a question here. He says, seems like McDavid is a lifer with Edmonton, and I'm not sure he gets the cup there. They've had chances. We'll see. You never know. Florida. Here's one thing I do think people have to look at with Florida. And, I saw some odds yesterday about, will Florida win the President's Trophy? I don't think they're going to. I think one thing that's going to happen with Florida this year is they're going to run into injuries. And the reason I say that is they've been in the cup final the last 3 years. That's that schedule, not throwing the Four Nations last year too. Some of these guys can't be 100%, and I think that's going to add up. Like, I think when you're these teams that keep going to the finals, you're playing more hockey, you don't get much of a break to rest up. I think Florida, just like last year, I don't think they're going to be President's Trophy. I think they're going to be, probably they'll obviously make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll be like one of the best teams. So this ties into the Oilers as well. I do wonder as well if there is going to be some fatigue of having, 2 cup finals and then trying to get back there again. I mean, if you've got McDavid and Draisaitl, you've always got a chance. That will always happen, and that's always going to take place. But is that something you've thought of as well? That, like, for example, these non-playoff teams, they've got time to rest, heal up. There's teams that dealt with injuries. Is that a concern for the Oilers at all, just because they have been to the finals twice?
I would say to an extent, yeah, it is tough. Because, it's a lot of hockey that you play when you add in 82 games. You mentioned right there, James, the Four Nations, the postseasons, deep runs, 2 cup finals, you go to Game 7 and Game 6. It's bad. It'll take its toll on you. And Edmonton last year, one of the oldest teams in the league. And even Florida as well, had one of the older teams in the league as well. So for both teams, maintaining these rosters when your core is made up of guys who are veterans is going to be tough. It's going to be a challenge to do it again, and especially for Florida. Can you go back? I mean, in the NHL, we have to go back decades to find a team that three-peated for a Stanley Cup. That doesn't happen. I think it hasn't happened since the Islanders won it back 4 times in the 80s. Like, a three-peat in hockey doesn't happen in the modern era. And getting back to a cup final 4 times doesn't happen either. So for both Edmonton and Florida, it's going to be a big thing to try and maintain these teams, because you're not spraying chickens on either roster.
Yeah, it certainly adds up. Quickly before we go, I wanted to get your thoughts on the East. There was a lot of movement there. Obviously, the big one, Carolina making a number of moves. They get Nikolai Ehlers. They trade for Keandre Miller. Is that enough to get them over the hump? One of the things that, if you kind of look at, the Hurricanes, is they keep getting stuck in the Eastern Conference Final and they can't get over the hump. Do you think those moves could potentially do that?
I hope so, because the Hurricanes, they're a really fun team to watch, and I do want to see what Rod Brind'Amour can do to finally get this team past that hump, because you see the Hurricanes, again, you bring Ehlers, you bring Keandre Miller, 2 guys who've been studs in this league, and I do love Eric Tulsky, someone who's a different kind of GM, came in from the pharmaceutical world, the blogging world, to become an NHL GM. And I do think what he's done has been great to build his team forward. I do think the big thing is going to be, again, you're going to run into Florida at some point in time with the Hurricanes. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. I think the big thing is if you can get Carolina and Florida in round 1 or round 2, you got a shot. And I do think I want to see how the Carolina forward core holds up, because that's a team, if they can find a way to hang on or hang in there with the Florida series, I think they got a shot at going to a cup final, because I've had Carolina as a cup final team for quite some time, And that one headache has been Florida. I think if they can get past Florida, not many teams can stop the Eastern Conference in my mind, James.
Yeah, I agree. Just same question as we talked about the West. Do you see any teams regressing in the East? I don't think the Leafs will miss the playoffs, but they have not filled that hole from Mitch Marner. I mean, they obviously made some moves. I like the Dakota Joshua trade, by the way. Gonna miss him big time in Vancouver. He was a great locker room guy, good physical player. Kind of wish they would have let that ride out, but I think with them getting Kane, it's kind of, they kind of have the physical presence already with getting that. Are there any teams you see regressing, maybe missing the playoffs? And are there any teams you think could sneak in? I do wonder with Detroit getting John Gibson, him being on a different team, maybe that's enough to push them in. But what are you looking at in the East?
Ooh, in the Eastern Conference.
That's a
great question. You know what? A team I do think is going to improve again, I think it's Montreal. I think the Habs are going to be a team that continues upward trajectory. That's a team that I've been watching them for a while. That's a fun young bunch. You have Davidoff there for a full year. Nick Suzuki doing this thing. I think Montreal is going to be a team that's going to impress people once again. And when it comes to regression in the Eastern Conference, that's a hard one for me. But I am going to say this is the year where you start to see a drop-off of Tampa Bay. That's a team where, yes, John Cooper has had his team playing well for many, many, many years. But I do think you're going to start to see Tampa Bay slowly drop off. Maybe not miss the playoffs, but I think they're going to be an afterthought this next year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot going on. By the way, Columbus is another team I think could sneak into the playoffs. They were very close last year. I think, this team, another year, some of those younger players will elevate their game. Avery, you're the best. Thanks so much for doing this. I know you're super busy, so always appreciate you making some time. Anything you got coming up that we need to check out, you let us know as we're wrapping things up here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just tap into my work on averysports.com and hockey. Has got a feature coming up I have a feature coming up very soon. I'm going to reveal it on the history of NHL Hits, the video game, and what happened to it. So nice. I tracked down a producer from Midway who made the game, helped make the game. So it's like a little retrospective, like why did this game go away and what's its future. So it'll be fun to read on averysports.com. What happened to NHL Hits?
There, you combine my two favorite loves, hockey and retro video games, Avery. Here, that's great. I'll be looking forward to that one. Go check him out on Twitter. That's AVRY. Avery, thanks so much for doing this. We'll get you back on at the start of the season, but I hope you have a great rest of your summer and keep up the great work.
Of course, James. Thanks, buddy.
There we go. That's our guy, Avery, from the Hockey News. We're going to wrap things up here real quick here, but great insight onto the Oilers. Again, one of the teams that, made some changes in the offseason. We'll see if they're better, worse. We'll see how this all unfolds. And obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on the Conor McDavid contract and seeing when that gets done. All indications are something will get done before the start of the season, but you never know. That's a tricky contract to put together. Like I said, what we're hearing, maybe a shorter contract, 4 years, but we'll see what the number ends up looking like. So that's all I got for today, everyone. I really appreciate you tuning in. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you guys want to discuss or any questions you had that maybe didn't get answered on here. We'll come back next week. I'm going to continue talking about different teams and what they've been doing in the offseason. We'll definitely get some more guests on here in the next little bit. I will see you a week today. And by the way, for the summer, we're going to 15 minutes later, 12:15 Eastern, 9:15 Pacific, just because of my schedule. It's been a little bit all over the place with my kids and camp and all that. So hope you guys can understand that, but really appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'll see you a week today. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys soon.